God of the universe, maker of the stars, who am I that you would know my name?
All right, it's time for the best show of the week. We're so happy you guys get to join us. This thing's just getting started. We're on episode 30.
Yeah.
Episode 30, y'all. But we're not with the typical four. It's just three of us, guys. We're going to miss Daniel Clayton this week. We're really going to be bummed out. And I know the topic we're talking about is something that is something that Daniel is super passionate about. So we're going to miss him. But this is going to be pretty awesome with just us three. We're so glad you get to join us because you got me, David Covert, you got Ryan Cribbs, and you got Mike Clayton, the infamous Mike Clayton. So, how are we doing, guys? How are we doing?
Doing good. Doing very good.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah, it's
Excited.
got a lot going on these days.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's been like that. I think I'm finally getting over. We talked last week about how amazing that conference was, and it truly was amazing. And thank you again for everyone who was tuning in that was able to go. It was truly an amazing and awesome experience. And I think we're going to continue along that same vein. But if you didn't get a chance to see us this last week, you are going to see us pretty soon at Revive. So it's going to be pretty awesome. We got even more time. We got more room. That means there's going to be a lot more people there. So please, if you haven't already, Hebrew Roots Network, go sign up. And they got hotel discounts. They got all that good stuff on that website. Go ahead and get registered. It seriously is going to be an amazing time because every year we've done this, God shows up in a big and mighty way. Just like on this episode, he's going to truly show up and it's going to be really awesome subject. So, Mike, what are we going to talk about today?
Okay, so we've worked together now for quite a few years. Been able to travel with you guys, the Exodus side of the road band.
Oh,
I have not been to the Exodus. We're in Bucky's band yet, but I don't have that much time left in life.
Ooh,
okay.
yeah.
But Mike did introduce us to this place.
I did, and then I
You
walked
did.
away.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I do
Yes.
actually still have the picture, David Covert.
Yes.
Yeah,
Oh,
that one's
that
coming
one.
out one of these days.
We can
So
keep that picture on the low there. We no one needs to know about that.
I can be bribed.
It very well could be. That would be yeah. That'd
So
be unfortunate that got out.
Here's something that we see. It's like, and I'm not pointing any fingers. I'm not trying to judge anyone or anything like that. But I've been in conferences, for a lot of years. And there's these times that it feels like there's a river there.
Mhm.
And there's this
Yes.
flowing of this river that's in the room. It's the river of the Spirit. And you'll see people in the room that instead of, there's no way that they can't be in the midst of the river, but yet they kind of built this wall around them to where they're staying totally dry.
Mhm.
Hmm. I think part of the problem, um, I don't like the term necessarily. I don't feel like it necessarily covers everything. It doesn't wrap it up and tie it in a nice little bow, but heart posture. And what I mean by that is, how are you approaching worship?
Hmm.
And oftentimes it feels like so many people come into a place where there is, like an evening of worship happening, let's say. And they come in with the expectation that the band is providing the worship and you are just there to be conveyed along.
Kinda
So
like,
there's no active effort being placed.
kind of like attending a concert.
Yeah, exactly. I'm going to sit here. The band is going to play. I'll throw this one in there too. They'll say things like, hopefully they'll play songs I know. so that I can join in,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm.
I feel like where the fallacy of that is it doesn't matter what necessarily the band is doing. It matters what you are doing individually, where your heart is.
Mm.
And I'd actually like to take us to scripture for this one. I've
Okay,
pulled it
that'd be a
up
good
right here.
idea.
Mhm.
So we're going to go to 2 Chronicles chapter 29, verses 27 and 28.
Okay.
It says, Hezekiah gave the order to sacrifice the burnt offering on the altar. As the offering began, singing to the Lord began also. All right, so we have an offering going on, and as the offering is taking place, there is singing happening. Then it says, excuse me, I lost my place here. All right, singing to the Lord began also, accompanied by trumpets and the instruments of David, king of Israel. The whole assembly bowed in worship, while the musicians played and the trumpets sounded.
Mm.
So let's break down that text for a second. We have an offering taking place, we have singers singing, we have instruments being played, and in the midst of that, we have an assembly that is bowed in worship. It doesn't say that the musicians worship. It says that
Ooh.
the musicians did their job that they were ascribed to do, and the assembly worship. So if you want to have a move of God in your assembly, or in an event, in a conference or whatever, I would say that it is a fallacy to ascribe solely to the band the entire responsibility of bringing in the worship. It is actually your responsibility where you are in the audience to join in with that, to get in that river. We've talked about the river flowing through.
Wow.
We can go on to 1 Chronicles 16:29. It says, ascribe to the Lord the glory due his name, bring an offering and come before him. Worship the Lord in the splendor of his holiness. This isn't talking anything about, whether you know the song or whether you're playing an instrument or whatnot. This is an actual heart posture. This is, you are coming before the Lord with thankfulness, with gratefulness, to ascribe the glory, it says, due to his name. I think that kind of sums it up.
Mhm.
David?
I was about to say, like, there's what you're talking about there. That is absolutely something from an audience perspective. That's always been something that when we go to events that we're not actually playing at, that always is something that I find interesting because then I get to find myself as the audience member from, like, the roles reversed, right? The roles
Mhm.
reversed. And so then it's like, okay, now I'm an active participant in what's happening here. And there's something, when things are happening, it doesn't, man, what was that guy's name? It just left my mind. I was thinking about someone who totally challenged my thinking of worship. And to your point, Ryan, of, well, I hope that they'll play songs that I know. It's like,
Mhm.
it's not about that. And I wish
That's a
if he's on
sing-along.
you know what? It's gonna come up at the end of this episode. I'll remember who it was, but he was, before we were a band, before any of that, this gentleman was singing from just such a depth of his heart.
Was it Jimmy Black?
Yes, thank you. Anyways, Jimmy Black. And Jimmy Black was singing, and some people have certain opinions about how his music is played, but he held a worship seminar at a conference and just blew my perception of what worship was out of the
Mm.
water, just totally blew it out of the water. And to this end, what we're talking about today is what he was talking about. This idea of this is not about you joining in with music, it's about you listening, observing, and we're calling it a river. Some people call it different things. It's a move that's happening outside of your knowledge of what's going on. Like, temperature wise, it's not affected by temperature. It's not affected by any of these things. It's just something that you feel within. And if you're not, it's not a problem with what's happening outside. It's usually directed at you. And I found myself, I'm not saying that I'm perfect. I have absolutely found myself in a bubble,
Mhm.
in a shielded area where I was being impervious to receiving like a telephone, right? I had taken my telephone off the hook and let it just dial tone, and so that I couldn't receive anything because where I was at positionally, either I was angry, I was
Mm.
prideful about something, or what have you, just was not ready to receive. And that's where I feel like that's where there's this disconnect where we're talking about either you join in and get wet or you stay dry. It comes back to why, where is your heart at with this? Because it's not about, oh, they're playing name a song that's always famous.
Mhm.
And unfortunately, with everything and how much money that goes into a lot of these productions, and I will talk about that. I really do want to talk about that on that side because I'm a gear guy. I love equipment and sound and all this stuff. But a lot of times, Mike, like you said, it turns into a concert,
Mhm.
and that's not where it should be. It should be leading you to a place where your walls break down. You should feel comfortable enough to break your walls down or allow your walls to subside. Because when you enter into that river, and if you've never experienced that, oh man, you don't know what you're missing. Because that could be a long conversation. I'm going to stop there. I'm going to let something else go here. I think though that what Ryan was saying absolutely is right. There's this thing where, as musicians, and I didn't grow up into being a musician, but I think worshiper, I absolutely knew what that was like. I knew
Mhm.
about that.
Mhm.
And like Daniel talks about, and I wish he was here because I know he could talk about this and I love it. And if you haven't listened to him, listen to his testimony a while back. He talked about that. And this is something
Yeah.
he really talked about. And he talked about how worship is worthship. That's just, oh, that if you understand that, that really makes a ton of sense. And to know that you could be there and on stage, I'll let myself go because as long as I just don't need to be playing. And I'm like, I'm joining in. I don't need to
Mhm.
play. I'm joining in. I don't have to back up to this. So
Does
I'm
it
gonna
does it
stop.
come does it come down to David? Maybe you hit a couple words, just kind of running through it there. That
Hmm.
at first you used the word audience, and
Hmm.
then you use the word participant. So is possibly part of the problem. I don't think that people are sitting there in this posture that we're talking about
Hmm.
on purpose.
You're right.
I don't think they're it's not a rebellious thing. It's not
Mm-mm,
like,
no.
well, I have seen that, you know. Yeah, now that I
Mm.
say that, I have, but that's not the norm. Is it
Mm-mm.
possible that for the most people, they've either never been taught about what worship is, or they think, well, since I'm not musically inclined, I can't do that? Or is it the stage, platform,
Right.
audience uh, concept that they have, like going to a concert? Or is it
Hmm.
D, all the above?
Mm. I think that I definitely wanted to hit on what you were saying there. I think you're right. It's the perception of which you're coming into this thing. Like I literally said, there's probably a bit of projection there from my own where I was at when some of those moments of my perception going into that was, oh, I'm just an audience member. And it was like, no, 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 you're a participant. You're right. Understanding that you're a participant in all this, that plays a huge role. Understanding that you're a part of a, because like you brought up Second Chronicles there, Ryan, about how the people started to break out into song. And I know we've all been there when random singing, it
Yeah.
appears random, but it isn't. And oh, I'm gonna get into that maybe a little bit. That whole idea when the river flows cannot explain to you how just miracles are happening that you don't even know. There's little miracles happening of just communication. Every one of those musicians is on the same page.
Hmm.
They're locked in, they know where they're going. So to say that, so that I'm bringing that up to say is that though that's what the musicians are doing, you can also actively join in with that because you're actively participating in knowing um, when there's that build up and release and all these things are happening as you're flowing in with it, almost like a choir. I guess that's something you could think of it. You're joining in as like a choir, a participant. I all I see is like you said in Second Chronicles, that whole being in the temple. There's an offering going on, and our prayers are like offerings, and everyone just singing out aloud in one voice, all in unity, is almost better than any instrument could ever do.
Mhm.
The human voice being probably one of the best. That's something, yeah, that
You know,
perception there. Mm.
you reminded me, Dave, in what you said there. There's a portion in the Siddur service
Mhm.
where it's talking about and the angels are gathered around the throne and they cry, "Holy, holy, holy,"
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And it's tradition, and you can speak to some of this, Dave.
Mhm.
But there's and it's a small tradition, but where those reciting "Holy, holy, holy," that you lift your heels off the ground three
Yes.
times with each holy.
Right.
Doing so meaning that you have left the earth, let's say, or the natural thing, and have come into a higher state of holiness, of worship. You're signifying by those three heel lifts that you are ascribing holiness and
Mhm.
greatness, but that you're also changing your posture so that you are worshiping, if you will, and basically signifying that you're leaving this plane and entering into the plane of worship of the Creator. I
Mhm.
think that's a beautiful thing. A lot of people miss that or might could misinterpret that, but
So then that's the idea, that perception of understanding that in Judaism, especially with liturgy, but there's a lot of liturgy and a lot of other things, that that idea of joining in something as simple as holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. All right, that line, holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. There's about nothing you could say wrong against that. I mean, if you got something, an issue with that, okay, there's about nothing you could say against that. And it says every time when, like Moses, when he's seeing the throne, when anyone sing anything, there's angels saying that over and over and
Mhm.
over again. And the idea of joining in with their voice. Think about that. Joining
Okay.
in with what the angels are doing every single day.
Okay.
And
I think I just kind of stumbled into this thing.
mhm,
Let me run with it and see.
mhm,
Is it possible that what we're talking about is the difference between those who have a realization that God is present in the room and
mm,
those who, maybe by no fault of their own, have just never come to that realization?
ooh,
uh, yes, I would
yeah.
say so. I would say
So,
so.
so Ryan, David, as those that are leading here, could we say that it is actually your job, your duty, your whatever it is, your calling, to bring them to the place of reality,
Mm,
the reality of God? Because once they experience that, then we no longer have to push people. You no
mhm,
Yes.
longer have to tell people to stand. You don't have to tell people to lift their hands. You don't have to tell people anything. When they get a realization of the creator of the universe, we read over that verse where Yeshua, Messiah, said, "Where two or more are gathered, there I am in their midst." And it's like, okay, whatever. What does that mean?
mhm,
The realization that when two or more gathered together in his name by his spirit, he is literally in the room.
mhm.
But many people have never experienced that. Let me
Right.
give you an example. Years ago, this was first or second year of pastoring. So this is 28, 29 years ago. I started, I had a couple of pastors that I had a relationship with. We got together and prayed once in a while, and that turned into much more later on. But this one pastor from the more charismatic, really the only charismatic church in the whole county, was sitting down in my office one day, and we're sitting there talking, and all of a sudden, the two of us stopped and just dead silence from a conversation, dead silence, looked at each other face to face, eyes locked. And I remember John looking at me and saying, "He's here."
Mhm.
Mm. That's
Mm.
powerful. I would like to add something to that. you know, to kind of add to what I talked about when we first opened the show, it is the role, the responsibility of the band to create an atmosphere, an atmosphere for worship. You know, we'll use the saying, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink.
Yeah.
We can lead you to water, we cannot make you drink. And to that end as well, if you are having, I would challenge you, if you're having a hard time during a worship service entering into a spirit of worship, change your physical posture. Get on your knees, get on your face. That revolutionized it for me.
Get off the back row.
Yeah, get off the back row. That changed it for me. I remember one of the first like worship services that I went to, and it goes back with my testimony for those of you that have heard it. When I first walked into that building at Sukkot for that first service, I had my mail read to me and everything, and we go into worship, and it was the first time I had seen anybody like actually get on their face and start worshiping. And I thought, well, you know what? You know, there's no time like the present because of everything that's just taken place in my life. And so I did the same. As soon as my nose hit that ground, the Spirit just flooded the room. And I mean, we stayed there worshiping for hours. It felt like minutes, you know, and none of us wanted it to end. You know, did I know any of the songs that were played? I think I knew one. Fallacy of, you know, play songs everybody knows so that we can all worship together. I just can't get behind. But yeah, I challenge you, you know, if you are having a hard time entering into that, change your posture.
I think I also wanted to offer up another what we've seen in the past as well. You speaking of that action being taken, and I know we have seen it at Revive. We've also seen it at Camp Mashiach in particular, where all it takes is one to decide. There's actually a song about that, but all it takes is for one to decide that they don't care what anyone else thinks.
Yeah.
They're going to enter in how they believe that where they know they need to be, whether that's on the floor, whether that's dancing, whether that's singing. It takes one, and it's like it's infectious. It just starts just rushing through the room. It's like a dry creek all of a sudden just opening up and just the water rushing forth. And it's that action that's almost been every single time that we've experienced as a band. I know you've seen it. Just took one. It just took one. A family, a person, just took one, and then just something else happened in the room.
That's why I love to see Leyland come in the room. She's the one. It's like,
yes.
Yeah, she's going to go. She doesn't care. She doesn't care. You know, I mentioned the backseat people. Okay. Now, if somebody goes to a conference and you see me in the back, there's a reason for that. And that is not because I'm trying to disconnect, but as a shepherd, I watch what's going on in the room. Okay. So during worship, a lot of times people are very susceptible. I've seen a lot of things happen during that time, and people that would like to take advantage of others. A lot of things happen. So I'm usually watching a lot. Unfortunately, what happens is when you are in that place, people think that they can come talk to you. No, I'm not there to be talked to. You know, or people get on their cell phones. The people in the back usually have their cell phones on. Okay. Sometimes you need to say, listen, I'm leaving this. I'm going to leave this, and I'm going to get closer because I'm going to get away from the distractions. And it may be that everybody else or a great number of people in the room are waiting for somebody to do that.
Yes.
You know, I've been in that service, Ryan, that somebody decided I'm going to the front and laying on my face. And all of a sudden it was like half the room is there, you know, Maybe you're the one. Oh no, it could never be me. I mean, yeah, I got that. I'm hearing those thoughts. No, maybe it is you. Maybe it is you, the one the Father's calling, and if you don't, you're holding him back. You're holding others back. Be a leader. In worship, be a leader. You guys have heard me say this to the men. Don't send your wife and children to do what, don't say to them, well, you need to go up there. No, you need to lead them.
Yes.
That's why I'm not liked by everybody.
Lead from the front.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Lead from the front.
So Ryan, I got a question for you. And Daniel's not here tonight, so we can talk about him. And it's and he'll probably listen, so well, whatever. But I want to go to something, and I hope it doesn't sound self-serving of me to ask this question, but I think the answer may be profitable to many people. Last week, what was it? Was it 2 weeks ago now? Yeah, 2 weeks ago now. When we were at the conference and you introduced Daniel, you said that the first time that you saw him play, you said to yourself, he's not a musician, he's a worshiper.
Yes.
Could you explain that a little bit?
Absolutely. So I guess to start, in my background, I've seen a lot of great musicians. Being in competition piano and that kind of thing, I've seen, the best of the best, people who, will win international competitions because they were so skilled at their instruments.
Wow.
Right. That is a musician. All right. I'm not taking away, Daniel has great skill at the guitar, so don't get me wrong. He is a musician and quite a good one in his own right there. There is a higher level of that, and kind of like we talked about in separating what worship is and what music is, right? Daniel, when he plays, it is obvious that he plays to an audience of one, and that is the Creator. And so all of his skill and all of his being, he puts in that endeavor without reservation. And when you watch that, you realize that he doesn't care that you are in the room. He only cares that God is in the room. The only reason he cares that you might be in the room is so that you can be there with God, with him. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah, totally. Totally.
And watching that, it's somewhat intangible. It's hard to describe, but you know it when you see it. That is what he possesses. I hope that sums up that statement.
David, you want to?
I was about to say, yeah, this is, I think I don't know how many times, Ryan, we have talked about these same things night after night after night after night, and we're finally able to actually put it out for others to listen to on the web, to be able to listen to it. But there's so much there on that subject alone, because I think one of the greatest things you can be if you're fortunate enough and you're essentially skilled enough to be up on that stage playing, one of the greatest things you can ever do is not play and just join in. And I cannot tell you how many times when that happens and you are actually being directed by the participants, and you're like, okay, let's go. Like, this is wild. Where did this come from? And you're in that river along with essentially the entire room that you're in, and everything's just being guided by someone who's not physically actually there, but his presence is very, very felt. That is what's incredible. And to that end, playing for an audience of one, I cannot tell you how many times we will be in the back, especially it's like there's a lot of people. Guess what? You get jitters, you get nervous. It always happens. But I know what we all think, because we all basically tell each other the same thing. There's no one else here except for one. The King's in the room and he's sitting right there. That's all that matters. The king's sitting right there. And that's all we care about. We do not care about what anyone else is thinking, smirking. That doesn't matter. Because also, it is also very loud when uh, when participants aren't participating and carrying on their own. It's actually not what you would think. It's actually extremely loud. Our noise is going out this way. We are hearing this as well.
Mhm.
And sometimes it's very distracting. We have to actually lock in and focus outside of that. And we've done it plenty of times. It doesn't happen all. It doesn't happen very much, but you'd be surprised at how loud it is from the back. It's very loud.
You guys were with me in a conference. I really got in trouble when I stood there and told everybody that was talking to get out of the room.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that really didn't
Yeah,
go over real well.
it
Uh,
doesn't.
yeah, but I don't care.
Hmm.
You know, and I don't say that in a flippant manner.
Hmm.
I don't care. It's, I guess, let me take this to a little different area here. I guess we need to ask ourselves the question of, why do we go to a conference? Why do we go to service? What, I mean, it's funny to me they call it service and most people don't.
Mm.
Uh, yeah.
Yeah, good
You know,
point.
yeah, you've heard me talk about, and I've talked about this, Rico, within the temple and the tabernacle, the one thing that's not there is chairs, you know?
That's right.
Yeah, in a church, it finally dawned on me why they called them pews. People have been
Hmm.
sitting on them too long.
Right.
Yeah.
Pew. Um, I don't think that was really why they called them pews, but that's why I think.
No, I
We
don't
need
think
to
so.
ask ourselves a question. We're called to come together, okay? But
Hmm.
why?
Mhm.
You know, it bothers me, and maybe I'm going to step on somebody's toes along the way, but it won't be the first time. It bothers me when there's different musicians there and they only show up for when they are leading.
Right.
It bothers me when there's other speakers there and they're only there when they're speaking.
Hmm.
I got it. Sometimes there's ministry that needs to be done. I'll have somebody that says, could I talk to you? And especially when it's young people, you know, Mike, could I spend a few minutes with you? Yeah, let's do that. But if it's obvious that if I'm not speaking, I'm back in my room or backstage or something like that, then people need to question why I'm there.
Right. That's something that we need to, I think, get back to, is the honor and respect that we show our brothers and sisters at these events and otherwise. And that's part of one of the reasons these events are there, is so that we can meet each other, we can meet new people, but more than that, that we can uplift and encourage, because you don't know who might be there and what they're going through,
Hmm.
what they might have brought there, what their hurts are. Um, I mean, that's what I know I have to remember, because putting these on, and going through the labor, it's very labor intensive. It's very costly, very
Yeah.
draining, to host these events, to set them up, tear them down, to travel. You know, um, the least we can do when we attend these is to show honor and respect to those that are putting it on, to our brothers and sisters that are there. Back to what I was saying, the reason I still attend, that I keep reminding myself of, because of it does get difficult to keep wanting to go and do it really does. It's for the one.
Hmm.
There could be just one there that needed to hear that one song or that one message, or you know it's for the one.
Yeah, I got it.
And
Good.
if you're not in the room, you're going to miss it, by the
Yes.
way. So if you're out in the hall talking,
Hmm.
you might just miss it.
Right. I would love to. I want to bring it from another perspective, especially from uh, something that I absolutely love doing is I got to do that last event. I said this in the last podcast is the being able to worship on stage and be able to join with my brothers and sisters and going uh, and following in with what the spirit is dictating that the room needs and finding where that is, what's going on, because it's very responsive to who's there is what does that. And but I do absolutely love the behind the scenes. And I wanted to, if I may, I want to take up the people that are working, if you think about it, the ones who are working to make sure everything's working correctly. The sound guy, the light guy, the
Yeah.
camera operator, the making sure everything's running good. If you have it a wonderful event enough where you got a monitor guy that's on stage, like there's a lot of backup crew. In the bigger events, it gets that way. We've been in the big and the small. We've seen them both. And then I know, Ryan, you've even gone to even the bigger stages. And I know Tony has as well, where there are a lot of people for concerts. That's where us as backstage guys have to remember that there's a balance. There's always that balance of you're extremely gifted in your craft. You know exactly what can be done to take this to the next level. Where does that line, what does this event need though, is always a question I always have in the back of my mind is where is it too far and where is it just right?
Mhm.
Because I would love to have lights that you could see when the worshipers are in a moment of, especially when worship leaders trying to convey where they're at personally in that moment, and you need a light to hit them so that you can see them. If it's dark, you're not going to be able to see. But I also know that there's so far that we could also run lasers and I could set up lasers. Do I need lasers though to actually convey that? There's that balance. How far
Production.
does that go? Where does it
Production,
become worship versus production? That's
Mhm.
something that all the there's been so many amazing people I've worked with that are just phenomenal. And there's been guys that have taught me as well. Do you need that? Do you need that for this event? Is that necessary? And I know in other places, especially in a non-worship event, that's not even considered. But if something isn't working, keep it simple. I've had too many times something that I felt needed to work had to happen. Then I realized maybe this doesn't need to work. Maybe I had a bad mental perception of, oh, this certain thing must work in order for all this to happen. Did it? Did it really? We've had sound equipment go down live during a worship event. We had it go down. Did that stop the worship?
Yeah.
Sure didn't. It sure didn't. And
So
you go for it, Mike.
if you have to have those things, okay. Um, I was at a church in Georgia one time, Southern Georgia of all places. They had lasers, a smoke machine, and a disco ball.
Mm-hmm.
Now I can tell you that it was energetic,
Mm-hmm.
but would I want that? No, because to me, you get to a place, and you and I have talked about this. You get to a place to where the production takes over, and I will. Anybody that's happened to be watching or listening, that is your places on the soundboard or all these places. Let me tell you, the easiest place to backslide is on the production crew.
that's right.
Because you
Right.
can become to the point that your job is important, but there's times that you need to say, guys, I need a break. I need to get out of here. If you're sitting there behind the soundboard all the time or behind a camera all the time, you can totally miss what's going on
Mm-hmm.
because
If
you're staring at a lens or you're disconnected from something unless you need your time. We need to be cautious of that, of, put somebody else up there that can do something, or maybe it doesn't even need to be there today so that you can spend your time. We all need that personal time and we all need that corporate time because there's something about bonding. There's a bonding that happens when you worship together.
Yes,
yes, sir.
I think that
absolutely.
probably you guys know Barry Phillips. Barry is one
Mm-hmm.
of my closest friends. And literally it was over 20 years ago, the second time that I was at the church that he was pastor at that time, that God came in the room. I mean, to the point that we were up on this is in the early days of the Hebrew Roots movement, when we had tallits and shofars, and a lot of that stuff's been left behind, but we were all dancing and everything. And there was just this kind of a hush moment that came into the room. And I was across the platform from Barry, and we looked at each other, and it was one of those moments that the presence of the Almighty was so real that it was like, if we do something wrong, somebody's going to die. That's how real his presence was. And that bonded Barry and I think has caused our relationship to, going through struggles and trials that we all do. That was something that bonded us. Worship together will bond you, will help you,
Absolutely.
no doubt about it.
I'm glad that you mentioned that, Mike, about the being on the production crew is the easiest place to slide. Um, that's something that's, I think, so often forgotten. Teachers, worshipers, so often we're giving out, we're pouring out of a cup. And newsflash, you can't pour very much out of an empty cup.
Yeah.
You've got to take the time to go and get that filled back up. And I remember it was so nice. I guess this was a couple years ago now, but we were able to go and visit a congregation that had a wonderful worship team there. And it was awesome to be able to join in and not have to be the one, like I talked about, with the responsibility of creating the atmosphere. I could just join in and actually worship, and how refreshing that was. So yeah, if you're in that position, be sure to take that time. And if you are also, for those that, like you said, constantly come to these events, to service but aren't servants, find out how you can be a servant to those that are teaching, or those musicians, or to the production crew, because those people are the ones that are constantly giving out so that you can continue to come and enjoy these events. And I'm not even talking monetarily, but find out how you can be a blessing to them. Can I pray for you?
Yeah.
Can I
Do you
bring
need
you a
water?
water?
Do you need water?
Yeah, do you need water? That's a big one.
Yeah. We always
That
need
kind of
water.
thing. Exactly.
Oh, I have something that it just speaks right into this. It actually goes really well. A lot of times this has also happened when we have in the past, not lately, thankfully. There is a special dynamic that happens between worshipers who are leading on stage and speakers who are either in charge of the event, or speakers who are meant to come in. Maybe I might, I don't know, maybe you might have some thing to speak on that side of that equation, because a lot of times, I'll point out, just to set up the example, sometimes there's this, um, like, let's say a pastor, or say whoever's leading and talking, they have a message and they're wanting certain songs because that leader will like those songs, and will say, hey, worship guys, I want y'all to do it this way. I want y'all to do this. I want you to play it this way. And it's always interesting from our side of the perspective of being worship leaders, where we go, hold up, we're getting different orders. You're telling us what we need to be playing here. Again, sometimes it works perfectly, sometimes it's great, but when that clash happens, and that dynamic is what I'm speaking about there, Mike. Have you experienced that at all, where
There's a competition. There is, unfortunately, there's a competition between speaker and the worship team usually. When we were at this past conference, I'm standing in the back there. I'm about to go up and speak. It's about 5 minutes from, and somebody looked at me and said, are you nervous? And I never get nervous. I can speak to 1,000 people. I don't get nervous, but I'm like a caged lion. And I do that when I come in to the conference, if I'm speaking like last, the whole weekend is really difficult, because that message is there, and I'm pawing at the ground sometimes. But when we worked together, let me just say it like this: Ryan, you're never my piano player. We're a team,
Yes,
and we must work as a team. And there's times
absolutely.
that I need to be able to look at you and say, hey, could you do a song? But I never
Mhm.
need to look at you and say, now this is what I want you to do.
Right,
And there's times that I need to sit down and let you run with it. And there's times that you need to cut it short and let me go.
right.
And we all need to be flowing in that river to where it's not about me, it's not about you. And this is why I think our dynamic works pretty good, because we respect one another.
Mhm.
I
Yes.
respect you hearing from the Almighty. I believe you do from me. And you know but I've been in places um that the worship team it was evident that they had been abused by somebody. This was at a congregation a long time ago, so nobody could ever tell where it was. But I came to the end. I gave an altar call, actually, and I looked at the worship team and said, "Hey, could you come up and play?" And they got ticked. I mean, to the point that he was actually yelling at me in the front. And it's not about me. And later on, I talked to the person about it, and it was evident that someone had abused him in that, and thought that
Mm.
I was just kind of telling him what to do. Nothing could be farther from the truth.
Right.
But that's what has been out there through the years.
Mm.
Yeah. And we have observed that as well, where sometimes there will be that spirit of competition between the speaker and the musicians. Where, for instance, I will know that I know that I know that I know that this song needs to be played at that
Mhm.
moment. And right as I'm about to do so, it's like, all right, well, we're gonna move on into this, and it's like, where were you, bro? Like,
Yeah.
the spirit was moving, this stuff's happening. Like, I don't know what you were, you know, feeling or witnessing or whatever.
I get
And that's
impatient.
unfortunate.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I mean, I get impatient because I don't just go to just kind of, to just talk about something. I
Right,
go to speak into people's lives.
right.
And so yeah, I can be in the back, and I'm a little impatient with it. And it's like, Ryan, you're supposed to do 4 songs and you're doing the 5th one. No, the 6th one, you gotta be kidding me. Um, but I find that the best thing that I can do to to walk in the anointing that will, as the scripture says, break the yoke of bondage, is to enter into your anointing
Mm.
and then to flow
Mm,
out of that anointing.
that's good. That's
That I
good.
think
That's
that's
helpful.
what I was wanting to offer, that idea that, because hey Mike, how many times have we done things and everything went right without a hitch, and it was on time, the speaker stopped on time, musicians started on time and stopped on time? How many times does that happen? Yeah,
0.
probably zero.
Yeah.
Zero. The ability, whoever's listening, if you're a speaker, then wonderful, hallelujah. We're so thankful that you're following the call that God's given you. You're a musician, wonderful. We're so thankful that you're answering the call God's given you. Understand that your ego has to be checked at the door. You've
Hmm.
got to realize that there's a point where you've got to go, okay, what's happening here? And did my message just change 5 seconds before I got up there? As musicians, did our whole entire set list just get thrown out? We have asked that. Brian, how many times have we looked at each other and went, the set list just changed, didn't it? It's like, yep.
Yeah.
Just like,
I mean,
follow the
two week
lead, and
two
we're just
weeks
gonna
ago.
figure it out. Yeah. It's like, follow the lead, and we're gonna get through this because something just entered into this room. And we've been there. And I'm telling you, if you can check yourself and allow him to move through, you'll see, because you'll know it, because there'll be no pride involved in it. The ego, you will not see ego on anybody. And you'll realize, whoa, I'm entering into something that is beyond my control. I just got to enter into the river and just let it flow.
Yeah.
And listening to that and knowing that that's the right answer is so valuable.
Yes.
Get wet,
Yes, get wet.
Yeah. Yeah.
you know.
Dive in.
Dive into the river.
Because maybe somebody else is looking at you, as a person that's known as a leader, as a speaker, people are looking at me. They're watching me. So if I'm sitting at the back on my cell phone or talking with someone, it's evident to them that I'm not taking what's happening in the room serious. If you're doing that, you guys are doing that, it's evident that nobody's taking it seriously.
Mhm.
If the men are not worshiping the children, I cannot tell men this strong enough. I work with young adults a lot these days.
Mm-hmm.
They're watching you.
What?
And let me take it one step stronger. Some men in the room are causing them to stumble on their way to worship. They're looking at you and they're stumbling and they're never getting there. Don't be a stumbling block to someone else worshiping. Don't be a stumbling block to someone else experiencing the reality of the Almighty in the room and in their life. I'm done. Closing words, guys.
I would say kind of the takeaway from today's topic is we need to apply more care and attention to the detail of how we enter into worship, whether you're a musician, a speaker, or just a participant that's attending an event, a worship event, or otherwise. This should not be done in a way that is flippant or just run of the mill. We've done this so many times. We need to be setting that atmosphere for those around us, for the young people that are there. We need to be cognizant that that spirit of lethargy, that spirit of complacency when it comes to worship, of let me sit here and you feed me, that does not come in. The spirit of any ego or self-righteousness or arrogance, it, like Dave said, it needs to be checked at the door. So that when we bring these events, when we enter into the worship, it's entered into seriously and with a heart of worship. I think that's what I would leave you with.
I think I would echo the exact same thing. I think that what is the goal of you going to a worship service? What is the goal? Ask yourself that. Why am I going here? Because if there's no real reason to go there, then why go? There's no reason to go then. Or are you wanting to experience the Almighty? And to explain that just a little bit, everyone is different. Imagine something so loving and so fearful at the same time that it just calms every single fear you've ever had in your life. Just all those just disappear. They don't mean anything. And for just a moment in time, all that matters is you and the Father, and that's it. And I think that as I've gotten older, I did not realize this as a young person. As I've gotten older, that kind of peace is very hard to come by. And to be in that peace is truly something you just don't want to leave. And so I would challenge anyone who's never experienced that, or they say, hey, I'm that back row person, or hey, I'm that guy that's sitting in the chair that's just like, can I just get to the meat and potatoes of teaching? I just want to listen to that. You might find more just hearing from the Father during worship, because it's not always the words that are being spoken by the worshipers in that room. It could be the words that God has for you. To well, that's a good segue there, Mike.
I'll take it because, maybe
Yes.
in that time of worship, David,
Mm-hmm.
he would speak to you and tell you that he has plans for you
Yes.
for good and not for evil, to give you a
Mhm.
future and a hope. So maybe people want to not just live their life on purpose, but live their worship life on purpose. Till next
Amen.
week, guys.